Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this video we're going to look at a wildcard draft for game week 6 that I've put together. This is roughly what I'd be going for if I were going to be using my wildcard in game week 6. I'm not on wildcard in game week 6, but yeah, this is roughly what I'd be going for. So as you can see on screen, Raya in goal, Fabianski on the bench. That could be any 4 million goalkeeper. Doesn't really matter who. Just kind of whoever you don't think you're going to want to be tripling up on. So don't go for, I don't even know if there is another Arsenal keeper or City keeper, but don't go for a team that you think you're going to triple up on. So Raya in goal. Obviously Arsenal's next few fixtures are brilliant. They've got Leicester at home, Southampton at home, then it's Bournemouth, which isn't quite as good, but still not so bad. We know the Arsenal defence is the best defence in the league. We know that Raya is just ridiculously good. So you'll see in a second that I've also got another Arsenal defender. So doubling up on them for their next few fixtures, or just long term, to be honest, seems a good play. So it's Raya in goal. Okay, on to the defenders now. And as I mentioned previously, I've got Gabriel in there as another Arsenal defender. So you're doubled up on Arsenal defence. Obviously, Gabriel is just an absolute beast from set pieces. We've seen this in the last 2 game weeks. He scored 2 goals from corners. Arsenal from corners are just a joke. And Gabriel is incredible. And they've got great fixtures. And they're the best defence. Gabriel's a no-brainer on wildcard, to be honest. Then we have Konza. I mentioned previously, or in a different video, that Aston Villa haven't been great defensively this season so far. But 4.5 million defender wise, there isn't a great deal of options. This could kind of be anyone. So you can see I've got Pinnock on the bench. I'll talk about him in a minute. But these 4.5 million defenders, it's kind of up to you where to go with them. Like some people like Leif Davis from Southampton. Don't mind that. There's obviously Dunk. There's plenty of other 4.5 million defenders that if you prefer one of them, then by all means just go for one of them. Then talking about Pinnock actually, so I've got Pinnock in there. The other option, which for my team I could afford with my team value, I don't know if other people can, but you could go for Flecken and Saliba instead of Raya and Pinnock. That's up to you. That is an extra 0.5, so not sure if that's the play or not, but there's no guarantee that Pinnock is kind of nailed with the other defenders they've got around. But this is just the cheaper option, Raya and Pinnock. Like I say, those 4.5 million defenders could be whoever really. Then you have Porro, who again isn't necessarily a lock in this team really. You could go without Porro. The other option is to maybe move it up to a Gvardiol if you've got an extra 0.5 that you can spend on that defender spot, because Gvardiol will get good minutes and he will sometimes play in this attacking role that he did last season. So I think he is definitely a viable option, more so than he was a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, if not, then Porro. Porro will always be so attacking. The clean sheets aren't really going to be there. We know that for Spurs. They are pretty poor defensively. Albeit in game week 5 they weren't that poor defensively. But Porro will get attacking returns. Probably more attacking returns this season than he'll get clean sheets. But that's absolutely fine. Points are points. It doesn't matter how they get them. And then the 4 million option is Mosquera on the bench. Now, he seems to have been struggling with a little knock or injury thing recently. You obviously don't need to play him this week. You don't need to play him most weeks, to be honest. But he keeps playing, so the manager must just like him. He has performed pretty well, to be honest, this season. And my thinking with this one is, from around game week 9 onwards, Wolves have a ridiculously good run of fixtures. So this is kind of getting someone in early. If you're wildcarding now, you don't want to be moving around a cheap defender. So if you get Mosquera in now, yes, he could get dropped or injured before you need to play him, but there's not much you can do about that. From game week 9 onwards, Wolves have a fantastic set of fixtures, so he can just sit on the bench for now and the other 4 can be the starting players. So this is the defence. Let's move on to the midfield. Okay, moving on to the midfielders now, and I know a lot of people are not going to understand some of the picks in here, but we'll talk about them. Saka is a no-brainer. Given if he's definitely fit, obviously, then he is a no-brainer. He's a captaincy option for game week 6 and game week 7 with Leicester at home and Southampton at home. There is no way that if he's fit and you're a wild card, you should go without him. Just pick him. Now, Bruno Fernandes, a lot of people are going to be suggesting that is a silly pick, and I get it. He hasn't done a lot. He's got 1 assist, I think, in the first 5 game weeks. Returns-wise, it's been abysmal, but underlying numbers haven't been bad. He's had chances and he's created chances. It won't continue that he won't get points. And Man United have good fixtures coming up. So if I were on wildcard, I think I'd have him. He by no means is he a lock in there. There are other options you could go with. Like a lot of people like Diaz. I don't like Diaz personally. I expect Diaz to start in game week 6. I expect him to probably be on the bench for the midweek cup game against West Ham. Then I expect him to start in game week 6 against Wolves. But long term, you just don't know. There's going to be rotation with Gakpo for that left wing spot. Maybe even Chiesa. We don't know how Chiesa is going to be used, but predominantly probably Gakpo in that spot. Same with Darwin and Jota up front. I just think that you can't really confidently go for any of them. Yes, Diaz is probably the best of the lot because he's played every game and he has been fantastic, to be fair to him. But maybe that means that he's needed for the Champions League games instead of an easy league fixture. Who knows? Arne Slot likes to rotate, as we can already tell from 5 weeks. So I get if people want to go for him. I personally wouldn't be going for him. Another option I do quite like is going a bit cheaper with it and going to Carvalho from Brentford. Obviously, Brentford have got injury issues with Wissa and their other striker that they bought. Carvalho started at the weekend, so I do think he's quite a good option given he's very cheap. And if you wanted to spend money elsewhere, then you could get Carvalho instead of Bruno or instead of Eze, who we'll talk about. But yeah, in this draft I've got Bruno in anyway. Then Rodgers, I think Rodgers is a pretty no-brainer pick, especially if you've had him for a while and you've got value tied up in him. I don't see any reason to sell him for 5 million. Everybody's expectations of Rodgers are way too high, I think. He's a £5 million asset. Like, he's not going to get returns every single week. The fact that he's even playing 90 minutes or close to 90 minutes every week is great value at 5 million for Aston Villa as well. So Ipswich this week, another great fixture. He's just a good pick and he's very, very cheap. So he'd be in. Eze again is not one that's locked by any means. Now that we know he's not 100% on penalties and probably isn't on penalties, in fact, he's definitely one that you could go without, I think. I really like the game week 6 fixture though against Everton. I've been going on for a good week or so now about how Everton is just the best fixture in the league right now. Yes, Branthwaite will be back soon. Don't know how soon. Don't know if it will be for this game. That will strengthen their defence quite considerably, to be honest. But there is no guarantee that he'll be back for this week. Even so, I just like Eze. He, again, is one that's disappointed returns-wise, but the amount of chances he's had, he's not going to just miss chances every single week like he did in Game Week 5 and previously. He is good. He will get returns. And Bomo, he is similar to Saka for me. He is just a no-brainer pick on wildcard. He has got brilliant fixtures. He is the focal point of that Brentford attack now that Wissa's out, Tony's gone. So he's on penalties. Well, probably. He's most likely on penalties. So for me, there is just no reason to go about Mboma. He is just brilliant. So that's the midfield 5. I've mentioned a few other players that I would consider. I would consider Palmer quite heavily. But to get to Palmer, you would probably have to downgrade somewhere else. Whether that would potentially be to... You could look at Fernandes and Eze, for example. I don't know if you'd be able to afford this, but you could probably downgrade Eze to Carvalho and then upgrade Bruno to Palmer. That is definitely an option, and that is probably quite close to these options, to be honest. Definitely one to look at. Or you could downgrade the second striker spot, which you'll see who I've got in a second. There is a bit of money in that. You could go for 2 cheap strikers as your second and third strikers. That is definitely an option to get some money to upgrade to Palmer, or even someone like Son maybe. But let's move on to the attack now. Okay, moving on to the forwards now, and obviously Erling Haaland's in there. He has some really good fixtures from game week 7, well, even from game week 6 onwards. Newcastle is, I'd consider, a good fixture now as well. But from game week 7 onwards, the fixtures get even better. There's just no reason to go without Haaland at this point, in my opinion. He is a captain option almost every week, to be honest. So, yeah, just pick him. Now, I've got João Pedro on the bench. I think João Pedro is just too good at his price to ignore. The fixtures aren't great for Brighton, don't get me wrong, but like I say, I think value-wise, he's just too good to not have. So, I definitely have him. And this structure with 8 attackers means that you can bench him this week. You can bench him in the coming weeks when his fixtures aren't so good, which is probably necessary. So, yeah, I'd pick him, but I'd likely bench him this week in this scenario. Then I've got Solanke as the second striker. He has a chance of being on penalties. In my opinion, it's probably Son that's on them. Ideally, we would have had a Spurs penalty by now to kind of gauge who is on them, but there is a small chance that Solanke's on penalties. I think there was probably more chance he was on penalties before he'd scored, because we've seen Son give penalties to other people. So if it was the case that Solanke was going to maybe get his first goal with a penalty, then maybe that was more likely. But regardless, even if he's not on pens, he's still a great pick. Spurs fixtures are pretty good in the short to medium term, so I think he's a good pick. As I mentioned before, if you wanted to upgrade a Fernandes or upgrade an Eze, then dropping Solanke down to someone like Dominic Calvert-Lewin, someone like even Strand Larsen, to be honest. Maybe not this week because they've got Liverpool, but long term his fixtures are good, as I mentioned with Mosquera. Or you could go to someone like Vardy or even Welbeck, although you've got the fixture problem if you go Welbeck, because when João Pedro has bad fixtures, obviously Welbeck has the same fixture, so you can't rotate them as well. But you can maybe rotate with Rodgers. Even so, this would be something like the structure I'd go with. What we'll do now is have a play around on Fantasy Football Hub and look at the kind of ratings that it gives us for this team. Okay, so I've plugged this team into the Fantasy Football Hub, my team tool. Now, you can play around on this. As you can see at the top of the screen, it gives you a predicted points for the week. It gives you a game week rating, and it gives you a team rating as well. So the game week rating is 94%. The overall team rating is 97%. So pretty good all round, really. It also, you can't see it on screen now because it's cut off at the bottom, but it also prefers playing Pinnock over Porro this week. I think that also gives it a 95% game week rating, so very high, to be honest. You can't get a great deal higher, but what we'll have a look at now is the AI Wildcard Team from Fantasy Football Hub, so that you can see what the kind of perfect team is per the Hub's AI. Okay, so as you can see on the screen, this is the best Game Week 6 wildcard team per the Fantasy Football Hub AI tool. Now, it is pretty similar to the team that I put together. It's slightly weaker on the bench. As you can see, it's Bednarak and Greaves as the 2 defensive bench options. But the reason for that is because it's got Gabriel, Saliba and Robertson. So it's got 3 premium defenders that you probably won't need to bench at any point coming up. As you can see, the fixtures are all pretty good. So it also has Flecken in goal rather than Raya because it's got Saliba instead. That was something I did mention in the defensive part. You could go Flecken and Saliba instead of Raya and Pinnock. That's what's happened here. That's probably because it likes the fact that Saliba is so attacking and that Arsenal's so good at set pieces. Then in midfield, it has Saka, it has Eze, it has Mbomo, it has Semenyo. Now, Semenyo is an option that I didn't actually mention when looking at the midfielders, but he is a fantastic option. Southampton next at home, then Leicester away, so kind of the reverse of Arsenal's fixtures. Then they do play Arsenal in game week 8. Now, you probably can bench him in that week. I'm not sure what João Pedro's fixture looks like in game week 8, but you could probably get away with benching him. For the next 2 weeks, Semenyo is fantastic. Everything good that's come from a Bournemouth attack has come through him at some point. He looks fantastic, so he's definitely an option. The two that I don't like too much here are Gordon and Isak. Now, they play Man City at home this week. That's not even the reason I don't like them. They've got Everton the following week, which is a great fixture. But I've watched Newcastle 3 times this season now, out of the 5 games. Every single time they've been so bad. I'm not sure that the model has maybe caught up with it yet, because models tend to keep, like, with form, they track it a little bit slower. If you've previously been very, very good, like Newcastle have for a while, to be fair, then the model will kind of slowly change. Whereas a lot of us that have maybe watched it eye test wise will try to change quicker. Now, there is every chance that Newcastle will just be good again. That is probably quite likely. That's why models are very, very good at predicting things and humans aren't. But I just don't think I'd go with Gordon and Isak. Gordon looked horrendously bad this weekend. I watched majority of the game. He looked miles off it, to be honest. He was so lethargic. He lost the ball almost every time he got it in the first half. I was quite surprised that he wasn't taken off at half time, to be honest. And chances just aren't being created for Isak. I don't think Isak has actually played particularly bad in any of the games. But when the team isn't creating any chances for you, then there's not much he can do about it. So they're 2 players that I probably wouldn't go with. But the rest of the team, I'm a big fan of it. And like I say, if you want to put any of your drafts into the Fantasy Football Hub tool and get it rated, it will give you a percentage rating. Check out the description of this video. With the link that I've got in the description, it will give you 50% off at the moment. So yeah, that's it for this wildcard video. If you've got any questions, drop them in the comments and I'll get back to you. But yeah, make sure you subscribe, make sure you like this video, and I'll see you in the next one.